So welcome everybody. Can you hear me? Is that working okay? I can't speak. A bit louder. So welcome everybody to the graveyard slot. So this is the last slot of the day, and it's been a very, very intense day. I want to congratulate Pathos for all of the work that they've done over the last 3 years. It's going to be really very useful. But we have something else on the agenda today, and we have something to celebrate. And that's celebrating the launch of the OSMI Principles. So I have some great colleagues here on the table with me today. I think we're going to hear about what the principles are, where did they come from, how did we get there? I'm an honored, so my name is Vanessa Proudman, I'm the director of SPARC Europe, and I'm also an OSMI initiator. So the OSMI initiators have been working on the principles, and it really has been a co-creative process. So it's really our principles, you in the room and many online. So thank you very much for that. So we will hear about the principles, and then most importantly, because this is really to serve the many communities who are interested in understanding the impact of open science and moving and progressing open science forward. So we have representatives at the table representing institutions, representing service providers, national policymakers, regional policymakers, and others. So we'll be hearing from them, how do they see OSMI in their context? And context is king here, as we know, so that we will be hearing different perspectives. And maybe in a year from now, we will evaluate to what extent the principles have been applied and have been actually useful. So these are considerations today because they're only just being launched, but I'm excited to have this session. Do keep with me because I know the energy is down. It's been very intense today, so just stay with us. We are the ones between the drinks. So let's just get going, and I'm going to introduce you first to two colleagues on my left, also initiators. So we've got on my very right, we have Nicolas Fressengeas, who is professor at the Université de Lorraine. He's an open science officer for the French Ministry of Higher Education and Research in charge of international affairs. And he's also the vice president in charge of open science for the University of Lorraine. And he's one of the OSMI initiators. And Letitia, I'd like to give a special welcome because OSMI really would not be here without Letitia. She has been absolutely amazing. So a special welcome and thank you. She's a library curator within the research support mission of the University of Lorraine Libraries, in charge of research data and bibliometric support services. She's also the project leader of the French Open Science Monitor, which I think has already been mentioned today, on research data and software code, and she also coordinates OSMI. So over to you to tell us about OSMI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. So my task is to tell you about the origin of OSMI, where does it come from. So if I click on this button, it should be launching. No. Yes, it is. Yeah, there we go. So I don't think I have to convince you by now of the necessity of having some monitoring on open science. We've been talking about that for the whole day. But in 2023, just if you want to remember, there was a communique by the G7 that encourages people to do open science, well, but encourages for a framework for monitoring the progress of open science and monitoring the progress and also monitoring the framework. So, well, I will not say that it's where it all started, but it's not exactly true, but it was in 2023, so more than 2 years ago. Well, not exactly 2 years ago. So if we look at this mission and if we look at the monitoring around the world, what we see is, well, many people have been thinking about that, have been starting doing monitoring. So we think of the Danish open access indicator, which exists, the French one. So Tisha is here to talk about it. Another one in Germany, in Charité. There are also international initiatives. So, of course, the UNESCO Open Science Monitoring Working Group, of course, and COKI from Australia. And perhaps the most important line is the last one, many more, which I certainly forget, and we certainly forget. There are many around the world, which you can find on the website of OSMI. If you look at that, and there are also guidelines and frameworks, again, around the world, which correlates, which are linked to what we're doing today, but not exactly the same thing. And in 2020, the principle of open scholarly infrastructures to guide how to make these infrastructures open. Of course, the UNESCO recommendation Open Science, I will not detail about that. Of course, the UNESCO Open Science Outlook, PathOS, we've been talking about for a whole day, and the Declaration on Open Research Information, which is related, but not exactly, not the same as Open Science Monitoring. The Barcelona Declaration for Open Research Information wants to promote the openness of the information on research, not on open science. It could be also on closed science. Of course, it's related to open science monitoring because the monitoring on open science will be open, as mentioned in the Barcelona Declaration. So we have all that, but do we have a common understanding all around the world on what is open science monitoring? Well, the answer is probably no. We need a global approach. If we look at the international initiatives, we mainly have the measuring of open access to publication, which is mostly done. But we need to measure everything else. So among, again, the most important line is the last one. But we need to measure the openness of research data, of open source software, clinical trials, and so on. There are many things you can open during open science. So, well, what do we include into that? That's the idea. The idea that was behind that is, okay, now how could we, around the world, sort of coordinate and merge together the initiatives to bring our efforts together, to bring ideas together, and to be as inclusive as we could. So it started, well, the SPARC was actually in this very room 1.5 years ago, a workshop that was organized, well, we started it here in the University of Lorraine and in the French Ministry to invite people, the people we knew at the time, with the people we started to organize. But there were still 50 international experts, you know, from various institutions. The names are here. And the idea was to get around, to get together and see how could we do something that would be inclusive around. So what we do at the time, there were 5 breakout sessions, actually three themes. So one about the principles, what would be the principle we would be talking about, a session about the community of practices, and 2 sessions about technical specifications. Laetitia will be talking about that later. So we discussed with the international experts, and with 16 countries. You can access the slides at the time. So that was a starting point, so the discussion about OSMI. So what are the high-level goals of this Open Science Monitoring Initiative? To promote worldwide the adoption of this open science, the principles, sorry, about the Open Science Monitoring, which have been released today, as Vanessa said. To provide recommendation for the implementation, for the technical specification, for the implementation of this principle. So this is not done yet, it's only starting. And to support stakeholders who want to implement that on all the levels. So OSMI is here to help. That's the idea. So the organization, there's a group of initiators because, well, we have to start things if we want it to work. So here are the list of initiators. Those are the people who declared their interest after the meeting over here 1.5 years ago. There's a coordination committee. Vanessa and Laetitia are in there to, again, make things work. The initiators is on it also to start things. There's a governance that is being designed that will, the initiators will erase and will be disappear when it's working. And most important, there are working groups. There are working groups that are organized to work and deliver on the objectives. So we have the first 4 working groups which have been designed by the initiators. It's only the first 4. There are other ones that will be coming later on. So the first one, scoping the needs of open science monitoring. So Nabila is somewhere, I saw her, one of the co-chair. So thank you very much. Those are the two co-chairs of this group. So the idea of this first working group is, okay, what do we need to monitor around the world? So yeah, we know in France what we've been monitoring. We know in Charité what's been monitored. We know in Australia, but well, what do people want to monitor? It's not that obvious. So, and we already had discussion that showed that it's not really obvious. So, well, the work group has some tasks to do to tell us about what we need to monitor. The second work group is understand what's been done today. We have a list on the website of OSMI, but again, probably it's not complete, it's not inclusive enough. So the idea of this working group is to try to paint in as inclusive as possible landscape of monitoring around the world. And the two other ones are groups which are more technical, but very important also. So the first one is, what about scholarly content providers? How can they help? Why do we need scholarly content providers? Because we need what's inside the papers. For instance, I take only the example of the French open science monitoring on data. How do we know that papers cite data? Well, we look into the papers. So to look into the papers, we have to have the papers. So how do we do that? How do we do that? That's the objective of the group. That's one example. And the final group is, well, if you want to scrap in the paper, if you want to look with something like AI, you need computers. You need computer power, computer time. How do we put that together? How do we have access to these resources and infrastructure? And that's the goal of Working Group 4. So as Laetitia knows much more about OSMI than I do, I will let her to talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, and thank you so much, Vanessa, for the kind introduction. So it's a very great pleasure for me to unfold today with you the principles of open science monitoring. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the journey we made together with this text. We had between spring and November 2024, a worldwide consultation about the principles, which was facilitated by UNESCO, which I'm thanking again. This has been a really great opportunity to improve the text because we had so many people involved in the consultation. More than 170 people coming from 42 countries. And that's exactly what we wanted to get different inputs from all parts of the world. And that's also what we have wanted to achieve with the working groups. You may have noticed that our working group co-chairs are coming from different parts of the world as well, because even though our first meeting was more or less European, we wanted to be really international. So this consultation then ended, and starting in December, we have integrated the comments containing concrete proposals into version 2. And then we had several and many meetings between the initiators, because we really wanted to take into account everything, because we felt that's what is important, is to give a voice to underrepresented countries and stakeholders, and also to take into account the variety of monitoring systems that are out there. So we also integrated general comments to finally have a version 3. And this final version was sent to all the contributors, and we had great comments after this final version from the contributors, and now it's finally out today. So the high-level principles, they are displayed in 3 parts. So the first one, relevance and significance, is really about having open science monitoring initiatives well-defined, relevant, and adaptable. So that's something really important because we realize how much variety there is in different contexts, in different parts of the world when it comes to open science monitoring. The second part is about transparency and reproducibility. We cannot imagine open science initiatives that are relying on closed information and black boxes. I will tell you a little bit more about it. And finally, the third part, self-assessment and responsible use. We don't want to recreate the impact factor, and we don't want to recreate the H-index. That's why we don't want to see open science monitoring indicators becoming the new individual assessment indicators, but instead to have those indicators used as incentives. So let's dip a little deeper in those principles. I won't comment every single one of them, of course. You will have all the time to look at the text, but I just wanted to put the light on one indicator in each part, one principle in each part, sorry. So for the first part, relevance and significance, let's pick the modular principle, because that is something we had many times in the inputs that we have received. Basically, one size does not fit all when it comes to open science monitoring. And it's really important to take into account different styles, whether it be quantitative, qualitative measures, or case studies. This kind of indicators all are relevant to monitor open science. So that's one principle that we want to emphasize. For transparency and reproducibility, well, you can see clearly the one that I picked, openness, because it's obvious, but it's actually the principle that took us the most difficult time, because, well, how do we qualify the fact that we want open science monitoring initiatives to rely on open input and output data? And how do we do that when we are still sometimes tied to documents which are not in open access? So this one is important as well. And for the self-assessment and responsible use, I'd like to take the constructive comparison as an example for this part, because that is also something many people told us about, basically saying, please do not recreate a new ranking system that would be unfair, but rather have open science indicators here to help incentivize and, you know, make sure that open science is just the standard for science. So I hope I have opened your appetite and your interest for the text, and you can have access to it right now. I'm counting on you to download it so that we have plenty of comments on this new version, and your feedback is really important for us. So have a look at it and tell us what you think. Just very quickly, because we do want to have time for questions, just a quick overview of the next steps for OSMI. So as Nicolas said, we are going to set up an international governance structure, which will take into account also the commitment of our co-chairs who are coming from all around the world. Following up the work of the first working groups because they all have their roadmap and deliverables. We are also going to launch 2 additional working groups, so one about capacity building and another one about technical specifications. We are also looking forward to the adoption of the principles by the UNESCO member states. And also, on a more practical level, we are also going to provide a self-assessment grid based on the principles so that open science dashboards, initiatives can evaluate themselves against the principles. So if you are interested in those, you are welcome to join the mailing list, follow us on social media, and join us also when we will have the 2 other working groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both. I'm sure you have whetted the appetite for the principles, and I'm sure there are some questions in the audience. We have some time for questions. Anybody got any energy left to raise a question at this point? Yes, Brecht, we can always count on you.
Well, you haven't heard my question yet. Thank you so much. I'm Brecht Salend from Science Europe. I mean, thank you so much. This is a marvelous piece of work. A lot of effort was put into this, and I think this is urgent and very important that it exists. And the open science community clearly has become much more ambitious in the last just 5 years. So monitoring, evidence gathering as well, is going to become very important, and this really sets us on the right track. I have one question. It might go a little bit beyond just the principles, but I have one question is that I know it's about monitoring all of open science, not just open access to publications, but for example, within open access to publications, what we know is that there are just wildly different models to get to open access. Like 100% of open access by just paying APCs is very different from 100% open access via community ownership models like Diamond. Could the panel comment on how OSMI plans to deal with that? Like that there's below the numbers that you're monitoring, there might be very different models in how we're getting to open science. I think that's going to be very important as well in the coming years. And I just wanted to know if there's any comments, any maybe even discussions that are already happening around that. So that's sort of my question to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I would say that it's not OSMI to tell how institutions or countries or stakeholders are doing their monitoring systems. It's really depending on the needs of each and every stakeholder. But I would say that what we are trying to achieve is that everyone is more or less compliant with those principles. Nothing is mandatory, of course, and the objective is that we would like to help initiatives reaching a certain level of openness, etc. But I do think that in the working groups, especially working group 1, we will see the different needs that countries or institutions have, and I think it's already something that came up. And well, I don't know how this will be sorted out yet, but it's definitely something within the scope of our working groups. And I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, well, what I can just add is the example of the French open science monitoring, which indeed focused on that, on the various way of opening, how to open, and the costs. We've talked about that all day with cost of APCs, all these kind of things. It's something that has been proven useful in France. So, well, I don't know what the outcome of the working group will be. But, well, yeah, the discussions have already been started, so, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And just to be 100% clear, I'm not suggesting OSMI like sort of prefers one model over another, But I think this is good information to monitor, basically, in the future. So that's, I think, my point. Thank you.
Maybe I can just add, it's all about the question, what do we want to monitor? And we hope that these principles will fit for every community that wants to monitor, in your case, understanding the models or the costs, etc. So, yeah, we hope that it serves everybody who has very particular questions that are relevant to their communities. Yes, back there, just behind Brecht. That's you, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really, I think, a brilliant idea. I'm very much interested in capacity building. We already talked. So from my understanding and from my profession, it normally falls into the capacity building tasks to then, if you like monitor something, yeah, and you realize, oh, okay, we might be good here, but we are not good here. So how is this working group, is this the idea of the working group? Or is OSMI going to support also institutions and organizations who want to develop further on?
Yeah, so this working group, we haven't launched it yet because we thought that we had to produce the principles first so that it has a basis to work on. And I'm also looking at my colleagues from the OSMI Coordination Committee, but to me, this working group is really about helping stakeholders starting or improving their open sense monitoring systems. And well, basically, how do we start when we want to launch something? We are not for a specific technical solution. We are we are agnostic with technical solutions as long as they are fitting the principles. But yes, this working group is about how you start, how you improve, and how you make your results useful, actually, how you communicate on open sense monitoring results, etc. And if you want to add anything.
Yes.
I just wanted to go back to Brecht's comment on open access. And I was really pleased to hear Letitia say that it should be left to the countries, the individual countries, to decide, you know, what they're going to monitor. And I find the principles incredibly supportive of local activity. I think it gives us a lot of flexibility, but also clear criteria in terms of, you know, are we on the right path? And I think as well as understanding what we want to monitor, we always have to keep in mind why we are monitoring. So Tony mentioned that, you know, different stakeholders have different whys behind open. So I think it's important as well at the beginning to agree the why of what you're monitoring. And in my example in Ireland, we have a national target to achieve a sustainable and inclusive path to 100% open access. So therefore, the percentage does not necessarily matter. This is not the only thing we're going to monitor. We have to look at the inclusivity and the sustainability. So that's, I think, a way to kind of avoid this conversation about what's the best route to open access and to focus on the why.
Yes.
Thank you. I have two questions, if I may. First question is quite practical. So in the context of a university, who do you think are best placed in implementing these principles? Is it the library, the research service, or academics themselves? My second question is about actually I want to hear your advice about how to sell these principles to academics, because of course you have done doing cost analysis and they are very good for universities. But I think in general there is a lack of incentives and recognition for academics who are doing open research. Like it's unclear in their promotion criteria, for example. So how can we motivate academics in adopting these principles? Thank you.
So I'll take this one. Your question is at the university level. So I'm vice president of the university, in charge of, that's important, open science, but also the digital policy and data. So the question is at what level and who should be involved in implementing this monitoring? Well, my answer would be at all levels. If you don't have a political support for that, if you don't have a support from the rector of the university say, we should do that, well, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I'm not saying you have to have a vice rector of open science, that's maybe not, but at least you have to have a strong political support. So then, once you have that, who are the people who are going to be involved in monitoring? Well, of course, people, Letitia is an excellent example. You need to have people from the library, but the people from the library are very good, but they are not specialized in computer science. So you need also to have computer science specialists, and you can also have data specialists and so on. So it depends on the organization of the university, but it's a transversal work. So political support and then transversal work on this. Now your question is, how do we motivate researchers? Well, looking back at the previous session, I would say the figures that were presented at the previous session on the costs and benefits are a good way to motivate researchers. So they will also, of course, they will answer to you, okay, is my time counted in the costs? So maybe not precisely enough. So we'll always give you some backfire on this kind of argument. But my experience is that if you monitor and you tell them, okay, we're giving you the figure, use them or don't use them. But if you use them, you can use them for your benefit. And well, let's take the example of our university. We have opened the possibility for each lab to have its own monitor. So monitoring at the team level or lab level, and they can pick it if they want, not forced to do it. They can pick what they want and what figure they want. Some chose to monitor the open access only. Some chose to monitor open access and open data, and so on. And they're making use of it to promote themselves. So that's what's in the principles. Use it for incentives. Use it in a positive way, but don't use it in a negative way. Don't force people to monitor, and don't name and shame, but let them the possibility to promote themselves on it.
Yes, in the back. Gareth, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the principles. I think they're quite clear and useful. I have a question on alignment. Alignment across existing initiatives, and also how you see they should be applied, and also reducing survey fatigue, which is quite clear and present. So let's take a couple of examples. You have the UNESCO recommendation, which issues a survey. So I assume the principles to some extent align with the UNESCO recommendation survey. But then you have monitoring of the implementation of open science and EOSC at the national level through the EOSC steering board, which runs an annual survey, been running for many years, right? They've clearly defined what they're monitoring there. And then you also have monitoring, and I'm not directly looking at my colleagues in the EOSC Association, but you have the EOSC Association running monitoring for the EOSC partnership, where the 200+ organizations are also monitoring the implementation of EOSC and open science. In most cases using different indicators, and in most cases often by the same individuals who have to now fill in multiple surveys. So my question is, how do you see this alignment, and how should these different organizations, sometimes the same organizations now, apply such principles?
So I'll take also this one. I'll let Letitia make it more precise, but I don't think the principles themselves answer that question. The principles themselves don't say you should do a survey or should not do a survey. They don't talk about survey fatigue, which is something that obviously must come in the conversation at some point. So my answer would be, it depends. It depends on the local context. It depends on what you want to do. So the French initiative, the French monitor, what was taken as a initiative for that is don't do any survey. Don't do any survey because the survey has two problems. The problem is survey fatigue, and the other problem is you answer what you want in a survey. So the French monitor works on open data and no survey. But that doesn't mean that everybody should do the same. That's an example of what's happening.
Yeah, and just to reassure everyone, we are not going to do a regular survey from the principles. Instead, we are going to propose a self-assessment grid that anyone is free to use whenever he wants to check if their monitoring system is compliant or not, or to what extent. I would say that no one is compliant for now, even us. So let everyone be relaxed, and yeah, so no survey from us.
I'm going to give Tony the floor, but I think I'd just like to ask if there are any online questions. The magic person online, maybe they could have a look, and we'll take Tony first, and then see if there are any other questions before moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great to see the principles published. Very clear and useful, as Gareth said. Maybe building on the comment from our colleague here, and regarding the relation to research assessment and place of individual researchers here, Susan said that we need to remember the question of why monitor, and then design with those purposes in mind for a diversity of purposes. And I just worry about unintended consequences of this being used to monitor individuals. We've seen from some of the recent metrics projects, so GRASP OS and Opus, there's some discomfort within Quora communities about the possibilities of this laundry list of metrics being used to assess individuals. And so maybe just with those possible unintended consequences in mind, how do you see, so Quora has clear scope of research assessment. It's about assessment of individual researchers, assessment by grant-making bodies, and assessments of departments and institutions. What are the lines of what monitoring entails as far as OSMI is concerned? It's obviously an outgrowth of the national open science monitor systems, but any of these indicators will be taken up at institutions who may apply them in more fine-grained ways if relevant guidance isn't given. Thank you.
Well, first of all, yes, you're right. It's not intended for it to be national. It could be national, it can be European, it can be institution-wide. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, what is the link with Quora? Well, it's an input data. It's an input data, and we are not, well, the principles do not talk at all about research assessment. I think I'm correct. It's not intended because it's mainly based on Quora. And finally, I think the main risk is just the one you put there. Once you have an indicator, people will want to game that, of course. And one of the main principles, which was shown by Letitia, is self-assessment. Self-assessment, is the indicator still an indicator? If it's a target, it's no longer an indicator. So it has to be reevaluated periodically, and exactly with what you have in mind here. That's very important. Something.
So are there any questions online?
Yes, hi. Greetings from
Hi.
Berlin.
Oh, nice to see you.
Congratulations to you and to us to the launch of Principles today. And there are two questions. I will name them, and if you need, I will repeat them afterwards. So the first question, maybe it was answered partially, but I find it interesting. What is needed to avoid to recreate the impact factor effect? And the impact factor effect is in quotes. The second question is, this was the question from Sarah De Coster. The second question is from Eunice Mercado Lara. She also congratulates us on initiative. And she observed that the OSMI initiative relies heavily on the perspective, resources, and infrastructure of government funders. But what about the philanthropic funders? Because she had an experience of them being not feasible to run these metrics and not having the same resources as governmental funders. And her question is, how can we take this initiative practical and inclusive for them to implement these principles as well?
So the first question was how not to recreate the impact factor effect. Well, yes, I think it was partially answered with just the previous question by Tony. So let's just repeat it. The impact factor has been a target. Now that it is a target, and it was not intended to evaluate researchers, even less individually. It was created long ago for that, and not for that. Now it's became a target. So well, it's no longer an indicator. So the solution is to abide by the principles, and particularly by the principle that says self-assess yourself regularly, not to be a target.
And thank you so much, Anastasia, for taking care of the online participation. Just about the philanthropic funders, well, that's something to be honest, I hadn't thought about yet. But I would say that we can rely on the principles in which we say, basically, you have to start small and start somewhere where it's useful for you. And it's if, for instance, they start with having one indicator, one relevant and useful indicator that is really helping them moving forward with open science, I would say it's fine. And I think this is one of the topics that will have to be tackled in working group about capacity building, how we start things, even though not every stakeholder has big funds to monitor open science. So that would be my advice to join Working Group 5 when it's launched.
Thank you so much. Apologies to those of you who haven't had the floor to pose your questions, but we have got the reception and there's tomorrow. I'd like to move on with our panelists because I'm sure you're itching to hear what they have to say as well. So let me just very briefly now move to the next part of this session to find out how useful are these principles considered by different stakeholders at our table. So I'm just going to introduce them very briefly. So to my left, we've got Cameron Name. He's the head of open science at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, that's CERN to most of us, where he leads a diverse portfolio of activities that aim to set the standards of a future open science ecosystem. He also serves as a director of the EOSC Association, a multinational pan-European effort focused on developing the next generation of scientific infrastructures. We then have Ariana Becerril Garcia, all the way from Latin America today. She's the executive director of REDILIC, the network of scientific diamond open access journals from Latin America and the Caribbean, Spain and Portugal. She's also the chair of Amelica, Open Knowledge for Latin America and the Global South, and professor at the Autonomous University of the State of Mexico. And then we have Michelle Barker, all the way from Australia, is currently director of the Research Software Alliance and also works as an independent consultant on open science. She has expertise in FAIR, research software, research infrastructure, open science, skills training, reward structures and career paths, and community engagement, if that's not enough. She is the former director of the Australian Research Data Commons. And then we have, last but not least, Mark van Holsbeek. Dr. Mark van Holsbeek is the head of the coordination department at BELSPO, which is the Belgian Science Policy Office, leading federal and international research policy coordination. He's a recognized expert in open science, having chaired the ERAC working group on open science and innovation. He's serving on the CONOSC board and has published extensively on the topic of open science, research evaluation and impact of social sciences and humanities, not to be forgotten here today. And he also lectures on science communication and research methodologies at the University Libre de Bruxelles. So as you can hear, my esteemed speakers really represent a wide range of stakeholders, and they have been briefed, and I'm really keen for them to share with you, first of all, why you think the OSMI principles are important for your communities. Who'd like to get us started? Mark? Yes?
Yeah, maybe, thank you very much, Vanessa. But the first part of my answer won't be very original. I think it's an excellent basis to look, at indicators beyond citation analysis and beyond, monitoring of APCs. But the real question, I think, and I build a little bit on Tony's remark earlier today. The question for me is, why should we use these principles to monitor open science at all? And there I think that I see maybe two main reasons why. And the first reason is what I really like in those principles is that they don't provide us with any solution. I mean, politicians do not like that. But honestly, I think this is a big asset of those principles. It's not at all a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not providing you with any fit-for-purpose solution, but it to some extent forces me to engage in in the building of evidence-based, not only monitoring, but reflexivity about what kind of open science ecosystems do fit our purposes at institutional, national, regional level. And I think those different principles really provide us with a framework that help us in this very much needed, I think, exercise of evidence-based reflexivity. And then, but this is totally linked, I also think that these principles, considered in a holistic way, all together, may also help us to engage in the collective drafting of new narratives about open science. Why do we need open science today, in the current context of 2025, not as it used to be 10 years ago, in the context of artificial intelligence, in the context of political attention to research security. And I think that by, engaging and encouraging us and also considering all dimensions and criteria that relate to the transparency of the processes, it also helps us to build narrative about open science as fostering research integrity. And I think that working, and I really think those principles will help us on collective new narrative, not totally new, but renewed narratives of open science for the current context. Those are the two reasons: evidence-informed reflexivity and evidence-informed new narratives, if I may say so.
Thank you so much. Who would like to react to that one?
May I?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thanks. And I totally agree with you. Actually, in the morning, we were told that in the first session with Eloy, that everything should start with a question, and I agree. And actually, I think that principles are the starting point before a question. So Then it comes the question of what we want to measure, and finally the indicator. So for me, OSMI is very important because it provides this framework of evidence base needed to assess the evolution of open science across the time, but also across regions, disciplines, and institutions. And also because I think it's very important, because without transparent, inclusive, and globally representative monitoring, open science risks becoming a narrative, repeating old biases, overlooking local realities, especially from the global south, which is often underrepresented in the global assessments. So for me, it's very important in that sense.
Thank you.
So if I may, I was at the meeting a year and a half ago, and I'll also confess to being, I have like a cynical streak in me. And so when I was at the meeting a year and a half ago, I was a little bit concerned that the room was primarily European dominated, and that you know, it didn't really seem like there were a whole load of very diverse voices in the room, although, you know, I do congratulate UNESCO for always, you know, attempting to be exclusive. Obviously, resource constraints come into play. And but what I was really concerned about at the time was this notion that someone may be offering a solution from the very beginning. So I have to congratulate the OSMI team for starting with principles, and I think that that's it's absolutely the right place. And for us at CERN, as we are, you know, actually right at the very beginning, really, of our own kind of comprehensive open science monitoring effort, we've been monitoring open access for quite a long time. We had an open access policy in 2014, but we didn't really have an open science policy until 2022. And so we're right at the beginning of kind of developing our own monitoring framework. And as we're doing that, you know, I see the value in revisiting frequently the principles to make sure that we are, you know, seeking alignment with some of the values that are reflected here. And before I say anything else, there was a moment right at the very beginning of this panel where some folks were outside, and Leticia was congratulated for her efforts. And I really want to take the opportunity again to, and Vanessa has done it too, but I think she really deserves a round of applause from everybody. It's been a monumental effort, and it's taken a lot of, and you can see the thoughtfulness that's been put into this work. And so thank you so much. And yeah, it's going to really help us as well at CERN as we go through our monitoring journey.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Michelle.
I'm really excited about this idea that we might be moving towards new narratives around open science. But I also want to emphasize that there are some parts of open science at which even the most basic narratives are missing. I've always been excited that the UNESCO definition of open science incorporates not only open access, open publications, and open data, but there's a range of other elements: open educational resources, open software, which is near and dear to my heart, open hardware, etc. And many of those lag in indicators, in analysis behind research data and research publications. And the principles actually call this out. They talk about the streetlight effect, saying that we often measure what's easy or what we're already able to do, but there are many other parts that we need to shine the light on. So that's why it's exciting to me to see that this breadth may also grow, as well as the depth and the innovation in how we approach these issues.
Thank you very much. I like that light metaphor. So that takes me to the next question. So which of the principles is really shining out? Which is the one that is most important in your view, in your communities? So we have a number, and Leticia took us through some of those, highlighted a few. Can you illustrate certain principles and share why they're important? Who'd like to get us going? Yes, Michelle.
Co-creation is my favorite principle, although many of them vied for that honor, simply because for anything to succeed, you need a community that are bought into it. So the principle of co-creation talks about not only engaging a range of academic stakeholders, but also non-academic stakeholders. But as any kind of initiative continues, on the adoption curve, we need a number of early adopters, of champions, and when co-creation has happened in that community, it's a fantastic indicator that those people will exist and then will enable that initiative to grow to sustainability, which is another one of the principles, that it will have that community behind it to ensure that it succeeds, that it has resourcing, that the need for it can be demonstrated, etc. So co-creation gets my vote.
So I'll say in the spirit of the principles, I'm not going to rank any particular principle as being more important than the other. Certainly co-creation, I think, is vitally important. I also really like the emphasis on transparency and reproducibility. That's something that we're going to try and do and reflect on it again as we're going through our own monitoring journey at CERN. There was a moment early this morning where we heard a definition of green open access which didn't really align with my understanding of green open access. And there are definitions of gold open access that conflate gold open access with APCs, which, again, I don't think is necessarily correct. And the fact that we're still unable to reconcile our understandings of really simple definitions for open access, which has been around for a very long time, to me means that we really have to have kind of this, participatory process where we collectively help to define or at least be transparent around our definitions and how we get to them. So yeah, so this whole notion of transparency to me is super important.
Thanks. Honestly, it's very difficult to choose one principle because they are all deeply connected. But if I had to highlight one, I would say inclusiveness, as because monitoring frameworks don't reflect the full diversity of research currently, languages, regions, or knowledge systems, especially, again, from the Global South, sorry to highlight that, then we are not capturing the real picture of open science. I also really value the principle of modularity, because it gives us the flexibility to adapt indicators to our own contexts. We don't have to force everything into one global metric, for example. And of course, transparency and reproducibility give us a strong ethical and technical foundation to build trust. So for me, that would be the favorite ones, but it's difficult to say.
Yeah, it was also difficult to choose because it's so systemic, but it was easy for me to choose contextualization because the context is in different principles. So by choosing context, I can choose different principles. But I think, contextualization has been missing in many monitoring exercises of open science in the past. So I think it's quite important in the selection of indicators, the interpretation of the results, but also, as mentioned, and this is very important in the paper, the contextualized communication towards the stakeholders. You also need to contextualize the communication after that the monitoring exercise has been done. And because we were reminded this morning that open science is such a boundary object, several commonalities, but different people and different stakeholders can have different perspectives on open science. It's very important to contextualize. For example, a bit more than a decade ago, I was working on a roadmap for French-speaking universities in open access, and I didn't have the principles back then, but now I'm doing the same exercise at BELSPO, which is not only a funding agency, but we are also managing 10 federal scientific institutes, which are also, most of them, museums. And it is very different to build a roadmap open science for museum than for universities. You have to take into account open educational resources, catalogs, a lot of things that you have to contextualize together with the stakeholders themselves.
So making the connection, bridging to different contexts. I'd like to hear a little bit, not from everybody, but how will the principles potentially change things in your context of the world with your different hats on? If you're a national policymaker or if you're a service provider, what would that look like? How could you apply those principles? How would they be useful in your region of the world?
You're targeting. Okay. Well, from the Latin American perspective, where we have a strong tradition on diamond open access and the perspective to, to work for science as a global public good, these principles are very, very important, and I think they can really make a difference, because we want to monitor and to assess our policies against if we are getting closer to the public good or not. And this is something that we haven't seen in any other monitors worldwide, actually. And it is also very important for us, for example, to monitor exclusion. So the number of people that are left behind, for example, beneficiaries of some open science strategies by country, by language, by gender, by race, by age, by ethnical conditions. So those are important indicators for us to really make the science as a global conversation. It is also important to monitor the gaps and to monitor the distortions, because we have a different starting point in Latin America. We are already open in many branches of the open science, so we want to monitor the distortions or the losses in that ecosystem, which is different when you are just trying to reach open science and when you are already open, just to prevent that openness to be decreased. So I think this is a different perspective, and for us it's a very important moment to define our own ways to monitor that and to contribute that back to other regions.
So if I may, Ariana, when you spoke the last time at UNESCO, you also mentioned this whole point of monitoring who's excluded. And I can tell you that that has stayed with me for a really long time, because I think that, we so often are so focused on like who is participating in open science. And I think this whole notion of thinking about, who are we overlooking and who's been excluded is super important. So I really want to thank you for that. Thank you.
Lots of thank yous. That's really lovely. There, I'm feeling the love about in this topic, monitoring. Michelle, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to extend this point about the contextualization that's possible with the principles, to suggest that they could even be useful beyond those who are overtly studying open science. So my region of the world, Australasia, has a number of countries that don't have national level open science policies. But of course, they still have research on research, meta-science, science on science. They still have policy units that are measuring the impact of their national investments in research to understand the value and communicate this back to the community. So it would be interesting to see to what degree those kinds of national groupings may still see value in these kinds of principles on how metrics, how assessment takes place, even if they're not using the word open science.
Thank you so much. We've been talking about, it's not just about publications, it's also about software and infrastructure, service providers. How what will OSMI do for assessing the positive impact across those different outputs, outcomes for open science in your different contexts? So as an institution, evaluating success, progress, impact, as a national policymaker or as a regional policymaker, or even if you're looking at the Software Data Alliance. So if you're looking at where we are with open software and how we're progressing that forward, I would love to hear your views on that. Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
I can speak a little about the software case. As I said before, my organization, the Research Software Alliance, really plays a role in increasing awareness of the importance of research software as a research output and bringing together community stakeholders to discuss how to better support that. But we're at a situation at the moment where it's difficult to demonstrate the impact of research software and the people that develop and maintain it. Of course, there are some simple metrics, but there's so much complexity and contextualization that the field has evolved to the stage where there are many flowers blooming, where there are many initiatives that have ways, some slice of the pie on how to demonstrate impact. And there are some represented in this conference, such as Open Air, the French Open Science Monitor, have wonderful ways of showing how often software citations are occurring in publications or in repositories. But they're all different, and some of them are looking at completely different pieces, some of them are heavily overlapping, and it's a little difficult unless you're an expert in that field to understand and compare and try and merge them together to get an even bigger picture. So some of the transparency principles around this might enable the field to develop in a way in which it's easier to make those comparisons and understand what each kind of initiative is showing and what they might mean when put together. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, maybe what I can say is that on the way I will use those principles very concretely at the Belgian Science Policy Office level, I personally won't do anything alone. I think those principles are in themselves a kind of boundary object that I intend to use. I was not involved in the preparatory work, so I discovered those principles, very recently, but we are now launching working groups together with the 10 federal museums and research institutes, and I think this will be an excellent way to not put, as we usually do, and it's not a good thing, monitoring as an afterthought at the end, but really using this principle as something we integrate from scratch in our, as I say, in our reflections about the type of open science ecosystem we would like to develop further within these 10 federal research institutions. So I will definitively use it, but not alone, as a tool for sharing and discussing while we are now working on new open science mandates at our level.
Thank you very much. Cameron, I'd like to ask you, as a lead on open science, as a very important institution, there are many institutions across the globe who are also managing a lot of open science innovation. So how are you going to use these principles when looking at progressing open science at CERN?
Sure. So I think the first place to start is to look at where we've already kind of built comprehensive monitoring. And as my colleague Anne-Gentile Becot is here, and she's been responsible for implementing our open access policy for many years, and now has expanded that role to open science. But as an example for open access, we have our sort of internal monitoring system in place. We developed a dashboard, and when we were first looking at what dashboard what technology we were going to use for that dashboard, the proposal that was first brought to us was a Microsoft tool, and we pushed back and said no, we need it to be open source, so that later, if we want to make, if we want to share what we're doing, that we want to kind of abide by those principles. And so I think at least that is aligned with the principles that have been set forth before us. We want to, I think, as we kind of progress along our own journey of developing comprehensive monitoring, and like I said, we're still pretty early in this. We now have some efforts around open data monitoring. For us, it's a little different to some other approaches because some approaches on monitoring look at data associated with publications primarily, or data sets referenced in publications. We release a lot of data that has no tie to any publications. And so for us, we have to figure out what meaningful monitoring of those data sets means, and how we can do that well. And as we figure out how to do that, and doing the same thing for software, we've entered into a partnership with Software Heritage Foundation to figure out ways of monitoring our contributions to open source software, that as we're doing that work and kind of figuring out the methodology, we figure out ways of ensuring that we can make our methods, data provenance, all of those different aspects available later. And so I think the principles give us a really good opportunity for reflection to make sure that we are kind of walking the talk as we continue along this road.
Thank you. Now, Ariana, you're a woman of many hats. So you lead a very important publishing system, right, and service for hundreds and thousands of journals in Latin America. And you're also involved on the national policy making level in Mexico. I would be very curious, I think we are all curious, as to how these principles could be applied in those two very different contexts.
Yeah, very different. Thank you for the question, Vanessa. Well, I think the richness of the principles is that we can it allows to implement situated monitoring. So we can adapt and contextualize our realities within a framework to monitor the evolution of science. And particularly talking about Mexico, we have recently, well, a couple of years ago, legislated at constitutional level open access, not open science, open access as a mandate at constitutional level. So for us in Mexico now, open access or access to science is a human right, declared in the Constitution. So I would like to know, and I advocate for having a framework for monitoring that, the evolution of open science in from the perspective of human right. And I think these self-principles allow us to do it in a very transparent and reproducible way, so others can take that as an example. And particularly from the perspective now with the head of an open infrastructure providing data as well, we would like to provide some indicators that are developed and run against that framework. So how, in this case, non-commercial diamond open access journals are providing a service that can help us to go towards science as human rights. So we would like to see that the both sides of the equation. Let's see.
Amazing, thank you. So my last question, and get ready because I would like to have some questions from the floor for our panel as well. But the last question is, so what are you going to do to encourage that the principles are applied in your context and region? So what could be one next step where you concretely do something with this? I mean, Cameron, you were kind of saying it sounds like very good timing because you're about to look at how you're monitoring certain things, but either locally or whatever local means, if it's in an institution or if it's in your region or in your continent, could you tell us what concretely would you like to do to get the word out and to really help us implement these principles globally?
Oh, implement them globally? No pressure. Okay. I mean, so at least we have to start at home. Mm-hmm. And so for that, it means that we need to apply these principles consistently as we're expanding our own open science monitoring. I think this will help us kind of further establish our leadership in open science, and also support evidence-based policymaking and transparency within our organization. I do think one of the things that Tony mentioned in his question, and we also had the same point brought up online, was that we really need to avoid the use of monitoring data being used in inappropriate ways to rank individual scientists and teams. And so we need to make sure that our approaches are consistent with CERN's own values and culture. And that means being, I think, having consistent self-assessment around updating and assessing indicators to avoid any kind of unintended incentives or gaming. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. Yeah. We hope to set a good example and use that example to influence beyond our own borders.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Please share. Yes?
Well, the first step, I think, we're going to translate into Spanish the principle. That would be a great idea. Yeah, and also to perhaps develop some use cases in Mexico and also at institutional level, because I think monitoring open science is like meta-monitoring open science. So it's how is now evolving from where the movement started and was formalized by the UNESCO recommendations, and now how it looks like in Mexico.
That's wonderful. We have already discussed the translation of the principles. We're not quite there yet to know how to do it, but I think UNESCO is keen to get it translated into their core languages, but we would really love the community to translate this into many other languages so that it's easier for you to apply them for. So fantastic, you've set us on the right track there, get us started. Thank you. Anyone else? Mark, would you like to share something?
Yeah, but I feel that I already answered more or less this question, by I will try to integrate in the work of those task force on open science, really those principles, not as an afterthought, but if I may I say something else? Because I already answered this question, so maybe I have a bonus answer. Looking back now at the different principles and thinking about what we discussed this morning about, impact of open science, I think that's something quite important, and maybe this is not a critic at all, but not in the principles as such for now. It's very important not only to look at, the extraordinary impact of open science, like what did open science during COVID time? This is important also, of course, what does this extraordinary infrastructure, how does it impact open science? I think it's also very important, and maybe in a very qualitative way, even not having quantitative data about that, but just understanding that, how the normal, the daily, the routine impact of open science in every researcher and other stakeholders, just daily life. And maybe this is as important as, having quantitative data about more extraordinary types of impact. This is something I wanted also to say. I think it's quite important.
It is very important. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. Michelle, would you like to share something either from the software context or from the region in the world?
I'm going to do something completely different, actually, get a tick on actioning it straight away by turning that question back to the audience, both online and in the room. We have many amplifiers of these new principles. We all come to conferences that are inspired, and I challenge you now to think about something you might commit to doing with regard to the principles, which may be as simple as reading them yourself, or you may then be able to move on to think about who else in your organization should be exposed to these, or some way in which you could begin to integrate them. So that is my suggestion to the audience on how to move forward.
You took the words straight out of my mouth. Does anybody feel inspired to, at this late moment of the day, to say how they would like to apply or start looking at these principles? Yes.
Hi, thank you. Well, I actually wanted to turn the question back to you. And I will explain why. So you've been steering open science practices, developing monitoring frameworks, and working with the OSMI Principles, so all very important things. And earlier today, we saw the state of the art in terms of evidence, toolkits that exist, and outside of the things we talked about, we know that there's monitoring frameworks, monitoring tools. So how do the principles meant to work together with the stuff that's already out there and the work that has been done? And from a practical perspective, How are we meant to integrate them? Are you thinking of evaluating things that are already out there in terms of the principles? Because a lot of work has been done already, so I guess that's my question.
Maybe I can just come in there. So, of course, we've heard of EOSC and Open Air and UNESCO. So it's been mentioned, right? So there are some big exercises of monitoring. It's up to you to look at the principles and to put them next to your efforts and to see how you can progress that forward. It's not for us to determine how you do that. We hope that everybody will work with these principles and we will have a wonderful system in place, more equitable monitoring system in place that also allows more comparison, more transparency and more. I think it's up to you to look at them with your teams. And of course, you can't do everything at once, but you start somewhere, right, with one or two of those, or where you can say, tick, 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 we've done that. But which are the really difficult ones that might take us longer? And I think Letitia also said there's this self-assessment. It's really for you to self-assess, just like the POSI principles, right? We've got these amazing POSI principles, and there are many infrastructures also self-assessing themselves against those. And in this moment of time, it might look one way, but in a year from now, we hope a very different picture, that you comply with even more of the principles that you do today, right? So I think it's on all of us to reflect on how these principles could work in our context. As I say, I think many of us are following very good principles already, but we could probably all do a little bit more. So sorry about being vague. Again, it's the principle of not giving the concrete solution. It's handing back to you, maybe as coaches rather than telling you what to do, but facilitating and leading you in the right direction, hopefully being inspired by the principles that has been developed by the community. Yes.
Yeah, so an idea that it's just to put it out there, so that self-assessment could be kind of the basis for, I don't know, a kind of a seal, like compliant with OSMI, something like that. Because I think that would be helpful for institutions trying to adopt indicators or something of the kind to see which are the ones that could fit into their own framework, and to adopt some that are already compliant with these principles. So this could be a suggestion moving forward.
Yeah, certainly. We have had people already knocking on our door saying, we comply with the principles, can you tell the world about us? So we are thinking about how do we share some of those good practices, right? So we would love to hear from you, right, Letitia? So those of you who are implementing those principles or actually stuck on some of those principles, maybe we can connect you. And I think one of the best ways is probably to be in the working groups, right? So to join those working groups. And there's some of them are also at, we have two sessions, so at different in different time zones. So the time shouldn't put you off. So really encourage you to get involved in the working groups as well, if you have time. Oh, and very fittingly, one of the working group leaders has her hand up. Yes, would you like to take the floor?
Yes. So for me, I think we will commit to taking what we've learned here back to my community and to organizing a local workshop to introduce the OSMI principles. And I'm also a co-chair, so that helps in a way that makes sense locally in our languages through our priorities and our stakeholders at the table. What makes this possible, I believe, is the flexibility embedded in these principles. I feel just working and being a co-chair, they aren't a rigid checklist. They are a guiding framework that allows each region, institution, or community to shape their own path towards open science based on where they are and what they need. the adaptability of it's very powerful because just being a co-chair, I have French African countries reaching out to me because they feel like they're in silos. They're not heard because the language barrier. In many parts of the global south, especially across Africa, this flexibility, I think, opens doors to inclusive engagement, and it allows us also to connect open science to local knowledge systems, to cultural context, and to the pressing health education and development that we need to face. And in doing so, I believe it would transform monitoring from something abstract into something more meaningful and actionable. So yes, I'm very proud of being part of this work group and working towards, with those principles and working towards an inclusive, open science. And I'm living inspired. I don't know about you guys, but I'm living with a commitment, and I'm living really inspired. And thank you, Leticia, and also the OSMI, to giving us just the opportunity to be part of this work. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being inspired and for taking action. That's really music to our ears. So I'd just like to remind everybody, if you haven't had the chance to look at the principles yet, look at them online, open-science-monitoring.org. The principles are there. We would love to hear from you. Do send us your feedback. With that, I'm going to hand it over to the organizers to tell us where the drinks or where the reception is. We hope you've had a wonderful day and that you've enjoyed this session. And let's celebrate.